There we go. Now it started.
Okay.
Okay, and so I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, I think this is working. Let me know if this is working. Can you see?
So far, it's just you. Hasn't gone split screen yet.
Oh, it hasn't? Okay, let's see. Screen share. Select a window to show. Let's try this. Oh. Whoa.
Oh, weird.
That was weird. Okay, wait. Is my screen splitting now?
It's splitting now, but
What about now?
okay. Now it's just the quiz. So
Okay,
if that's what
perfect.
you wanted, I'm fine with.
Okay, awesome. So, yes, I did that. Yes. Okay. So, let's just read it to ourselves and then we'll come up with our own answers and like you'll say what you think it is, I'll say what I think it is. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, design the study?
Yeah, that's what I got.
Okay. Describe the data?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Because, yeah, the keywords I'm seeing there, histogram to illustrate.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. You got this one?
Mm. So the population is what they're representing. Um, so yeah, citizens of Mabuti,
Mumbai.
Mumbai.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're like Mumbai. I was like, oh, okay.
Don't worry, I've got a brother who majored in Chinese.
Uh-huh.
He picks apart everything I pronounce wrong when it comes to different ethnicities and stuff. Like,
Oh, well, yeah.
are you familiar with Chinese at all?
Say that again?
Are you familiar with Chinese, like
No,
language at
not at
all?
all.
It's like, you know how in English your tone changes, if you're asking a question, like your voice
Yeah.
goes up,
Oh
or if
yeah.
you're giving a command, like
Uh-huh.
it's just monotone, but it's strong.
Uh-huh.
Chinese is kind of like that. It has five different tones, but rather than changing how you're addressing that sentence, it actually changes the meanings of the word depending on how you say it.
Huh.
And so, like, I can't give an example, but it's like it's the exact same pronunciation, but if you go high at the end, it's a completely different word. And I was like,
Whoa.
oh my gosh.
Ooh, they're like, wow, that's intense.
Yes. I know my brother told me, and it was weird. He says, like, and he's talking about accents and stuff, and it was really weird. He's saying that, like, Chinese, and you want to make sure you don't sound American. He's like, if you don't understand the language, you're just beginning, but you want to kind of sound like you at least kind of know what you're talking about rather than a total gringo. He's like, just speak everything like you're an old man who's shivering. He's like, that's about as close as you're going to get to a native speaker.
Huh.
And he showed me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like straight what you see from the movies. It's so weird.
Oh man.
But yeah, so if you ever mispronounce anything around me, no, I've been in that boat multiple times. My mom calls me out because I'm constantly making up words.
Really?
Yes, I couldn't say rivalry for the longest time.
Rivalry.
I kept replacing the R and the R and the L, so it was rivalry. It's
I'm
like,
like, I don't want to say it now. I'm like, how do I rivalry?
yeah, I'd
Rivalry.
switch the R and the L, so it was rivalry. Like, I'm like, I'm not talking about when I was a kid. Like, that was like up through my sophomore year at BYU.
There's a word. It was I pronounced it album. Wait, is that how I pronounced it? And it's oh, now I forget. But like when an artist comes out with an album, my mom was like,
Album.
"That's not right." I think that's how I was. How was I saying it before? I don't remember. But yeah. Anyways. Oh. Okay, so the sample is the this one.
Yes.
Okay. So quantitative?
Yeah.
Category? Category?
I'm not finished with this one. Give me a second.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, categorical.
I actually skipped into the very bottom. I was like, I
And
was
I
like,
should have when I saw that it was repeating itself. I just didn't know where to stop. And then I
yeah.
mixed up and had to go back like 3 times. So, do you understand the difference between quantitative and categorical?
Yes. Quantitative is numbers. Categorical is like categories. So like yes, no, boy, girl, like categories, I guess.
That's true for
Yeah.
like 90% of the stuff. Do you remember the examples that were in the text where that's not the case?
Phone numbers, right?
Yeah, phone numbers. Another example was jerseys. Um,
Okay.
another example would be, well, that one's up in the air. Basically, quantitative is numbers, but you have to keep in mind, can you put units on it?
Okay.
So for example, in the above question, it's asking what is the data? Your teacher gives you a short 10-question quiz and the score out of 10 is rendered. So they give you a number, like 9 questions out of 10 or 90%.
Mhm.
You have to have a unit on there. A telephone number, if you give someone a telephone number and they're like, okay, what's the units on that? You're not going to be like pencils, like
Yeah.
there's nothing to it. It's just a number.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing is um I'm not sure how much Sister Cook is going to try and trick us up on stuff, but if she is the type that tries to do thumb is if you can attach units to it,
Okay.
then it's quantitative. If you can
Okay.
attach units to it or it's not a percentile, then it's categorical.
Okay. That actually makes a lot more sense than just numbers and categories. Okay. Awesome. Control group?
Yes. And just to kind of elaborate on that, um, why would they be the control group as opposed to us?
Um, so the control group is kind of like, mm, I don't know how, they're kind of like what you compare it to. Um, so yeah, I don't really know how to put into words, but the control group's kind of like what you compare it to, like nothing is being tested on them in a way, I guess.
Okay. No, no. It sounds like you got it. Just putting into words can be important.
Hmm.
So you're right. The control group is the baseline. They're not receiving anything. And so that way, when you're testing with the treatment, you can actually test if there's a difference.
Hmm.
And so the main thing is what's the treatment in this study?
The 10 minutes of, or the review after
Okay.
class.
So
Yeah.
the treatment in this case is the extra review, the extra study time.
Yeah.
And who's receiving that? That's us. So that makes us the treatment group. So the group who doesn't receive that is the control group to make sure that they're unaffected, to make sure that
Hmm.
they're that baseline that you're talking about.
Okay.
So it sounds like you kind of understood it, but does that help you kind of put it into words better
Yeah.
if you get asked later?
Yeah, no, that totally makes, yeah.
Okay.
And is there a hypothesis group in this question?
No, hypothesis group and population group are just throwaway terms.
Okay.
Actually, going off of that though, what is the population?
All the students?
Let's see. I think so. I think they're kind of vague. I don't think they say. Yeah, I think it's just students in general
Yeah.
because they're not saying like specifically freshman students or biology students or something
Yeah.
like that. Just students in general. But then and then what's the hypothesis here?
If they will remember more stuff if they have that review, I guess.
Yes. And it'll probably be a question further down. So then what's the null hypothesis versus the alternate hypothesis?
Ooh. Um, the null hypothesis is gonna be that, okay. Um, if students study or have more review, then they'll remember more than students who don't.
No, you've got it reversed.
Oh, dang it.
So the null hypothesis, hence the null, means nothing. Think
Uh-huh.
of it, the null hypothesis is the hypothesis if nothing changes. And so our hypothesis, like you said, is if students spend extra time studying, then they're going to do better. And
Yeah.
that's the alternate hypothesis, right?
Yes.
So we always introduce an alternative hypothesis because we want to change the status quo. The status quo is right now, well, we don't know, so we just assume that studying isn't going to make any difference. Well, I
Okay.
have a hypothesis. I think maybe if they studied more, they would do better. And that's the new hypothesis. And that might be the easier way to think of alternative
Okay.
hypothesis is as the new hypothesis.
So kind of like what they're testing is the alternative.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay,
Because
that makes sense.
it gets really picky later, and we'll probably have a discussion on this just because of how frustrating it is. But um, depending on how deep you get into it, and I'm sure health sciences you'll be getting into points where you have to be really nitpicky and stuff.
Yeah.
But the reason why they do it that way is because in science, and this sounds really weird when you try and explain it to people, but in science you can't prove anything. You can only disprove things.
Yeah.
So, like proving the world is round, they didn't really say prove that the world is round. They just had something that proved that the world wasn't flat. And the next best
Yeah.
alternative is that the world is round. And so that's why we always have a null hypothesis, which is how we view the world now. Then our alternate hypothesis is something new that we want to bring in, and we can never prove our hypothesis true. Instead, what we do is we take our alternate hypothesis to disprove the null hypothesis. So in this case, the null hypothesis is the amount of time you spend reviewing isn't going to affect your grade at all. If we come in with an alternative hypothesis and all of the results and everything and show
Mhm.
that grades went up, that doesn't necessarily prove that our hypothesis is true, but it does disprove the null hypothesis because we're like, well, scores did go up. And
Yeah.
so it gets really nitpicky. I'm sure that we're going to have a discussion on this later. Uh, Once we start getting into really deep into null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis and the p-value and that kind of stuff. But did that kind of make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot more sense. I was
Because
like,
it's because
oh.
it's really finicky and it's really dumb. But the thing is, it makes a lot of sense
Hmm.
because the example that I had a professor give me is, let's say that um, you had a hypothesis that there is a mouse in your room. I mean, let's say that you have a hypothesis that there's not a mouse in your room.
Okay.
And how would you prove that? Well, you'd prove it by looking around every square inch. But the thing is, while you're looking in one corner of the room, the mouse could have been running behind you into another corner of the room. So the only way to really prove it is to know absolutely everything about your room in any given instance, you know?
Hmm.
On the other hand, though, if you end up finding the mouse and pulling it out by its tail and you just have it right there, then you can point to it and say the hypothesis is false. You always have to kind of work conversely. You can never prove your hypothesis true. You can only disprove the other hypothesis.
Huh. And so when you say disprove the other hypothesis, you mean the null hypothesis, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, and that's what they're doing in this study is that um, they'll probably have the results down the line, but we can't say that studying, doing some extra study will raise your grades. The null hypothesis is studying extra has no effect on your grades. That's the null hypothesis. And so we do our experiment and we show that it has affected it. And so you say, well, the null hypothesis is no longer true. And
Uh,
that makes it sound like, well, the new hypothesis is true, but really it just becomes the status quo and it's just kind of sitting there as that's why everything's called a theory, because it's a theory because it can never be proven true. It can only be disproven. So we
uh,
let theories just kind of sit around and kind of become the status quo until something bigger comes to disprove it.
yeah,
Because
that makes a lot of sense actually.
Because the idea is, and this actually ties into the gospel really well, is that we never know truth. Like the only way we know truth is through revelation. So left to our own devices, all we can do is observe and do the scientific method and stuff. All we can do is observe and come closer to the truth. But we'll never achieve full enlightenment and full truth without receiving revelation. So the thing is, when we say things are, when we're talking about the sun will rise tomorrow, we're just saying that because we have no proof that it's not going to happen. But the fact is, it very well could be any number of things could happen, like the Earth stops rotating, or the sun goes supernova, or a million other things could happen that would keep the sun from rising. But because we don't have proof that disproves our current theory, we hold that as quote unquote truth.
Huh. That's really interesting.
So hopefully I'm thinking, because my stats class that I took went really deep into that, I'm hoping that because of biology, because it's biostats, it won't go so deep into the theoretical stuff. But I'm just giving you a heads up if that pops up in a future lesson, that you'll at least have kind of an introduction before we start going into it.
Yes, for sure. Thanks for explaining that to me.
Oh, no problem. Like that was something that I was so caught up on. But once I understood it, it made so much freaking sense. Not just in a secular side, but on a gospel side and stuff too. It was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like that's
light bulb.
Yeah, like it was so yeah, it was so interesting because like it's true, because I remember hearing the only truth we receive is through revelation. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, what about all the physical laws that we're understanding? And my car drives. Are you saying that we don't understand the principles of an internal combustion engine? But after going through that stats class and kind of learning that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, we understand the ideas behind combustion and chemical interactions and equations and stuff. And every step brings us closer to the truth, but we're still nowhere near the truth of how things interact on a molecular level,
Yeah.
Like we understand it enough to use it. We understand it enough to be pragmatic and make machines and vehicles and that kind of stuff. But on an actual truth level, we're far from it.
Yeah.
Like we just know enough. We just know enough to utilize it, and that's the difference. The only way you can truly know, truth is to have it revealed.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, you ready for question 10?
Yes. Okay. This one?
Yes. How is that different from the other three?
So these ones are just collecting, like, this would just be yes or no. This would be yes or no as well, I guess. And this would be yes or no too. But this one's actually like a design, like, okay, we're gonna have a placebo and we're gonna have this other group actually get the vaccination, and so you're testing something instead of just asking something, I guess.
Okay. You've got that. There's just going a little bit more technical.
Mm-hmm.
So this one's called an experimental design. What do we call it if it's not an experimental design? There's really only like two things in the text.
It talks about, what does it say? Oh, observational?
Yes, an observational study.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and so that's how you just remember it, is that if all you're doing is observing, just observing, and that's the thing that you have to take into consideration, because like you think of observing monkeys through the glass, they're still doing experiments on them. They're just being in a safe place to watch the results. Yeah. So yeah, you have to ask, are they doing anything beyond just observing? And
Yeah.
yeah, a telephone pole, all you're doing, you're not changing their behavior in any way. You know,
Hmm.
you're not giving them different pills or you're not telling them to drive a different way to work. You're just simply observing through asking. And that's exactly what the other two are, just in different forms. So, paper, a census, and a telephone of just asking. So, yeah, you just want to make sure if all you're doing is observing without changing their behavior at all, then yeah, it's a observational study. Whereas if you're actually changing their behavior and you determine which groups do which behavior, then it's an experiment.
Okay, that makes way more sense than what I said.
No, it sounds like you had it. It's just like
Putting it into words, it's like,
yes, no, that's the thing is you need to understand where I'm coming from. I
yeah,
freaking so I got my bachelor's in molecular biology at BYU,
yeah.
and then I got a doctorate in pharmacy.
Oh,
And
wow.
my
Yeah.
my goal was I wanted to be a hospital pharmacist.
Okay.
Because a lot of my family's in health right now, and I have a neonatologist brother who's telling me about like all the cool things that pharmacists do in his hospital and stuff. I'm like, heck yeah, I want to be a part of that. So I made sure to go. I did research on virology at BYU, and then I did research on um, actually anti-cancer medications in
Wow.
pharmacy school. But just with the way things are right now, long story short, the gateway to entry in order to get into a hospital is a residency, like what doctors do,
Hmm.
and it's just so competitive that I didn't get a residency. So I've
Ooh.
been doing retail pharmacy for the last 5 years, and it's just kind of come to a point where it's just kind of like, oh, this isn't what I want to do. Like I really want to get more into uh, the thinking category and kind of being more on the scientific side of things.
Yeah.
So I'm doing BYU Idaho's online computer programming. Um,
Okay.
because like I said, I have a dad who's a computer programmer. I have another brother who works for Microsoft, and he tells me about all the crazy things that he does. And I'm just like, holy crap, that sounds so cool. And like with my mind, I'm like, it's really stupid, but I see the way they write code, and I'm just like, it makes me think of if you ever heard the trope Lego genetics, where it's just kind of like you break apart the different genes and you can make brand new creatures, which is not the way biology works, but it works that way in computers. I'm like, that's so cool. I want to do that. So
That
anyway,
is really
that's where I'm
cool.
coming from. I have way too much education. So
I'm like
I
still trying to get my bachelor's, so I'm just here.
yeah, no, you're good. So I don't want you to ever feel as though like I'm talking down to you or anything.
No, no,
I
I
just
promise. Like, I don't
I've
feel
just
like
gone
at all.
through
So,
yeah, I've just gone through years and years of using proper and very succinct language
uh-huh.
because when you're telling somebody about how to take their medication, if you use the wrong word, even though for the most part they could mean the same thing,
Hmm.
it could be very hazardous. So you got to make sure you
Yeah.
say the correct thing. And so my vocabulary has just kind of been shaped over the years. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm kind of more able to say it on the more precise, stupid level where you're just like, shut
Uh,
up. I already know what you mean. But
no, no, it's actually really helpful and it's like made a lot of good points and like you're kind of I have like dots, and you're like connecting the dots for me if that makes sense.
okay,
Like
perfect.
I'm like
That's why I decided to do tutoring to get me through school, as opposed to continuing with pharmacy because like that's what I feel like I kind of on that level, and I'm like, oh, I want to explain things to people because I had some awesome experiences. I had one woman, and I'm sorry for sidetracking, but I had one
you're
woman
good.
who came into my pharmacy with her husband, and she was literally in tears and like she didn't know what was going on. She's saying that she was just having um, she was having moments where she just didn't remember. Like she would black out for like half the day. And it's
Holy.
not like she was in bed, it's just that she didn't have any memories of it. Like her husband was like, no, you went to the barbecue with me. You don't remember it? So,
Whoa.
so she was freaking out. And so I spoke with her and we went through, and it turns out that she had her general practitioner. So she had her family doctor, um, a doctor from a hospital, a physical therapist, and a pain specialist. but none of the three doctors were communicating with each other, so they kept prescribing like medications for the same things. So she'd get duplicates. Like there are different medications, but they're pretty much for the same thing. So she's
Yeah.
getting a lot of duplicates. She's getting a lot of things that she didn't need, and she didn't, like it was just like, oh my gosh. So I just kind of told my technicians, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be in the consult room for like half an hour helping this couple. If an emergency pops up, grab me. And so I was able to help them out with that and just kind of tell them, walk them through all of their medications. And
Holy cow.
and
You might have
then
saved this lady's life, though. I mean,
yeah, like, well, when I saw her the next month, it was just like I saw her and it was like a complete 180. Like she came in with her son and she was just bright and happy and bubbly. And she was telling me about, yeah, her doctors weren't communicating. And when her doctor heard about it, he's like, there's no way you should have been on that much medication. And like that seriously was like one of like the best days of my life. But the thing is, you see that all the time in the hospital. But that was
hmm
seriously, like, it was like one of like two, maybe three times that I saw it in just a community retail setting. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of like, I was like, oh, I need to switch things up. So that's why I'm kind of jumping into the tutoring scene. And so I'm really glad to hear that this is making sense to you, because
No, it's
that's
you're
that's kind of the whole point. Is my end goal is to do programming that involves genetics. So like think like ancestry.com,
uh-huh.
and kind of segue that into teaching. So that's my end goal. So I'm really glad to hear that I'm helping out.
Yeah, no, you totally are, and I really appreciate
Okay.
it.
If you ever need me to shut up, go ahead and say so.
No, you're fine. I have nothing else to do today other than this,
Okay.
so you're good. Okay, let's do 11.
11.
This one?
Yes. So to start with this question, so it's asking what's the best sample? What's the population?
The population is the working people of that place.
Mumbai. Yeah.
Mumbai.
So
Uh,
so you got the right answer. Why would all the female workers not be a good answer?
so I mean, females, especially in India, I feel like won't be work. I don't know actually what it's like in India, but I figured that probably, I mean, that's leaving out half the population, the males. So that's not it. And then this one would be, I feel like it'd be kind of biased if you only did people that were on the streets because, you know, people who are usually working aren't in the streets. Unless, I guess they have a lot of outdoor street shops, but I don't know, that just didn't seem like you'd get a wide variety of people. And then this one, all the workers in working district. I feel like that wouldn't be the average either. I don't know. This is just
Yeah.
like in several. It like covers all of India
Yeah.
or Mumbai.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. The fact is, if the population was women, then the final answer would be the best. But yeah, since we're talking about men and women, if you're specifically excluding half the population, then that's going to give you some skewed results. The first one is actually a pretty good choice, but when you have many randomly selected from many districts in Mumbai, that is
That's
the
way
best.
better. Yeah.
And then the second one, kind of what you're explaining, just to put it into words, I think about it this way because it's talking about workers in just one district of Mumbai.
hmm
When you keep yourself congregated like that, you're going to find, for lack of a better word, birds of a feather flock together type thing.
Yeah,
I
so like poor
think,
areas, rich areas type of thing.
yeah, like think about it this way. If you were, let's say you're doing a study and you wanted to gather, you could say the um, computational literacy of a population. So how comfortable people are with computers. And
Yeah.
then you go to, and then the only place that you ask people is you go door to door to trailer park. Do you think that's
Yeah.
going to skew your results a little bit?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't say anything specifically about how this one district is different than the other districts, but that's always the risk, is that if you just centralize on just one portion, there's always the risk that there's something about that group that's different from the rest of the people, and that can skew your results.
Yeah, that totally makes more sense.
So you're totally right on all three of those.
Cool.
Okay, so you got this one?
The children?
Yeah, because they're the ones who do the treatment. And
Yes.
that one's pretty straightforward. And
Yeah.
and just so you feel better
Hmm.
about this question, because when I would see things like this, it's like, oh, these kids received a vaccine and then the other one's got a placebo, and you think placebo, you think sugar pills. It's like, congratulations, you just doomed half of them to die. It turns out in medicine, like you hear placebo,
Uh-huh.
but in medicine, when you're testing with when you're doing a test versus a placebo, the placebo is considered the industry standard. So if you're doing a new blood pressure, if you're doing like a new blood pressure medication, it's
Uh-huh.
not like you're giving half the people the actual blood pressure medication and the other half sugar pills. It'd
Uh-huh.
be like you're giving you're giving half of them your new medication, and then you're giving the other half Plavix. And then you're testing to see if it's better than Plavix. Because if it's not better than Plavix, and that's the industry standard, why the heck come out with a new medication that's going to cost you a ton, you know?
Yeah.
So
Is that
just a
like,
little FYI. That had nothing to do with this assignment, but I just remember seeing like medication tests and they talk about placebos, and I'm like, that's got to be like against the Geneva Convention or something.
yeah.
But no, placebo doesn't mean a sugar pill or nothing. It
Uh-huh.
just means a standard. And so you do the industry
Oh.
standard, like the current industry standard of the best blood pressure medication versus the new blood pressure medication. And if it's not better than the industry standard, then why release that medication? No one would buy it. So
That
just FYI.
Yeah, no, I always thought it was like just like you said, it was like nothing. They're just yeah, that's interesting. Cool.
Okay, question 13. What are the actual treatments?
Mm, this one?
Yes. Did you have any questions about that one?
I mean the treatment is just what they're giving them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
What would the number of incidences of the virus and administrators be?
Um, oh. Um, oh, I don't know.
Okay, first off, what would the administrators be?
The administrators would be, oh man, remember reading about this. They, um, I don't know what they're called actually. I guess, I mean, like, I remember them talking about
Anything.
like, a double-blind experiment, and that's when like both the subjects and the administrators don't know who gets what.
Ooh, yes, double blind and like even triple blind and stuff. That stuff gets fun.
Ooh.
Yeah. So as of now, they're nothing though. That's just a red herring.
Okay.
So Just
Okay. I was
wanted
like,
just wanted to throw that out.
"Ah."
But what is the number of incidences of the virus?
Um, I'm not
Because
sure.
this one was, I'm pretty sure this one was in the reading. If not, it should have been in the reading.
Um, yeah, I don't remember if it was or not.
The term is, and tell me if this sounds, if this rings a bell, but it's called a response variable. Is that ringing any bells?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Well, in layman's terms, the response variable, and I'm sure that we'll see this later, the
Hmm.
response variable is what you are measuring.
Okay.
So we add a treatment, and so for example, the number of incidences of the virus,
Hmm.
if our vaccine versus the placebo does not change the response variable, so say that there's 100 incidences of an infection per 1,000 children,
Hmm.
and then even with our vaccine, it's still 100 per 1,000. That's the response variable. The variable hasn't changed at all in response to our treatment, and so that's a case where we'd say, "Oh, well, this vaccine isn't doing anything." But yeah,
Okay.
it's called the response variable because it's supposed to respond to your treatments.
Okay. So, for example, if I come out with this new cure to whatever, a new vaccine, I want my response variable to be lower than the standard, correct? Or did I get that mixed up?
No, you're right for rule of thumb,
Mm-hmm.
but there's always things that pop up. Like, for
Uh-huh.
example, your response variable for LASIK surgery, you'd want better
That
vision.
you would want the response to be higher
Yes.
than your standard.
So,
Okay, so yeah, I guess
but
it
but,
depends
but
what
you're
you're
right.
testing.
When you're coming up with cures and stuff, you want blood pressure to go down, you want cholesterol to go down, you want incidences of the flu to go down. So as a rule of thumb, you're right, but just make sure you take every instance as its own instance and make sure which way you want it to go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because, like, for example, if you're touting oxygen therapy and you're saying, if you do our oxygen therapy 3 times a week, you'll be able to run 14% farther than you could before and want the
Okay.
instance to go up.
Yeah, that
But
makes
again, that's not a cure. So
yeah.
you're pretty much right. So don't worry. Just make sure to take everything by case basis.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's do this one. Oh, hold up. Someone's knocking on the door. Hey,
Thank
Dad.
you.
Sorry, I had to let my dad in. He was locked out. Okay.
Okay, you got this one?
Sorry, give me one more minute. Okay, yeah, so this is definitely an experiment.
Yes. There
Okay.
is a lot of fluff text in there.
Yeah, I was like,
To
okay, get to
throw
the
you
point, get to the point, get
off.
to the point. Yeah, sorry, I was like, I should have just read what it was asking, like what study this was. So yeah, they're controlling the, the environment, they're changing things, so it's an experiment. They're
Okay,
not just
perfect.
like observing, I guess. But yeah, there was a lot of fluff in that.
No, some, yeah,
Oh, this is
there are. I remember going through at a, um, oh, we're going over epigenetics
uh-huh.
with one of the people that I tutor the other week. Epigenetics is a freaking trip, man. Just FYI.
I have never even heard of it, so I can only imagine.
Have you ever met um have you ever met identical twins who look different?
Isn't that fraternal twins?
No, I mean like actual identical twins, but they still turn out differently.
Oh, they still look a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like I graduated with some twins and one of them is I think he's like 5'10", but
Mhm.
his twin is like 6'2". Like
What?
yeah, and that's the thing is height is encoded in your genetics, and that's because of epigenetics. And so like you get your genes from your mom and your dad, but then
Uh-huh.
long story short, environment can come into play and actually turn genes on or off depending on different stimuli. And so in the case of height like that, it's usually attributed to nutrition, but living in a first world country, I'm not sure if the other twin was malnourished or anything. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy that they're identical twins. They look exactly the same. Like if it wasn't for the height difference, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. But one is seriously like half a foot taller than the other. Like it's a
that's
trip.
that's crazy. That's intense. Oh man. I haven't ex I've met hmm, I've never met like identical twins that had like a height difference. But like I feel like with identical twins you can still kind of tell like who's who
Yeah.
by just like little things. But yeah. So this is
And then this
that
one's just straight memorizing. What
uh,
is the mnemonic? Oh, actually, it has it right here. So if you remembered it.
yep, right?
1532. Oh, our results are different. Okay, I was looking at that. I was like, we got wrong numbers. But mine are, yeah, no, my top one is discern, truth, can, more, Daniel.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, no, it looks like we're good. And it looks like you're running low on battery. So let's submit this and see how we
Oh,
do.
uh-oh. Okay. Cool, we got 100.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. And so you don't mind uploading this onto the discussions board?
Oh, yeah, no problem. We just
Okay.
do it on this, right?
I'm
Upload
ass-
your group video here. Yep, cool.
yeah. And yeah, you're the one who's recording this, so you'll actually have the URL, so you better do that.
Yes, I sure will. Cool.
Okay. Uh,
So Thursday, let me stop sharing my screen so it doesn't do that. I think I just, okay, yeah, I think I just stopped sharing. Okay,
okay,
so yeah,
perfect.
I will see you 4 o'clock your time on Thursday, right?
Yes, and yeah, as the semester goes further along and stuff, um, seriously, like I don't want to be like I know absolutely everything, but
But
if you seriously well, if you feel like you kind of just need your own little personal tutor and you want to spend some extra time on these, I'm really flexible this semester. It's the summer right now, so most people,
yeah,
are back home working their summer jobs so they can pay for school. So my tutoring hours are going to be way low. So
awesome.
I'm going to be
Honestly,
a
like
lot
you're
more
like a
flexible.
godsend right now. Like I'm like this is like an answer to my prayers. So I'm actually really excited for the semester and yeah, so
Okay, perfect. Like, yeah, obviously we'll be meeting 2 times a week, but
Mhm.
honestly, if you have any questions, and you need to grab me on a Saturday or something,
Cool.
because like, no, honestly, and this is how stupid and loserly and dorkish I am, but I, like I said, I'm a tutor. I enjoy explaining things to people. So
Yeah.
don't think you're imposing. If I understand it, then I actually enjoy teaching it to you and explaining it to you. And
Yeah.
if I don't understand it, we can work together because we're in the same group, and so we better both understand it.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
don't
Awesome.
ever think that you're imposing on me, okay?
Cool. I really appreciate it. And this is going to be a good semester. So, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, I'll
Awesome.
see you
Okay.
on Thursday.
I will post this and I will see you on Thursday.
Okay, later.
Okay.